everyone, I'm Gina Gomez. Welcome to our SnapEd Connection webinar, Writing SnapEd Stories, Simple Strategies for Success. We're excited to talk to you today about telling your SnapEd success story and share some of the tips and information that we have that might make the process more efficient and effective for you. A few things before we get started. Over to the right of your screen, you'll see a dashboard for interacting with your webinar and asking questions that you might have along the way. Because of the number of participants, we're not going to be able to accept questions via phone or audio, so we're asking you to please use the chat box to send us your questions. And you can access that chat box if you go over to the right of your screen, probably toward the bottom. You'll see a little right pointing arrow next to the word chat. If you click on that little arrow, it'll expand the chat box, it'll open the chat box, and that's where you can write your questions. So once you have that open, you have to select the recipient and then type your question. From the recipient list, please select all panelists. Then in your text box, you type the question and click send. We will be answering the questions at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to send them at any time throughout. This webinar has been pre-approved for 1 CEU hour from the Commission for Dietetic Registration, for those of you who are interested. So we will be sending out certificates of attendance to all participants on today's call. We'll send that via the email that you used when you registered. So keep your eye out for that in the next few days. We have 4 speakers today. Each of them will be speaking on different elements of telling your SnapEd story. First, we'll hear from Jennifer Anderson, who's with the SnapEd Connection team. Then from Stephanie Cousins, who's with Brighter Bites. Beth Peralta with the University of Illinois Extension. And our 4th speaker is Pamela Bruno with the Center for Excellence in Health Innovation at the University of New England. So to start us off, we'll hear from Jennifer Anderson, who, as I said, is with our SnapEd Connection team. She's going to give us some basics on success stories. And Jennifer, I'm going to give you the presenter status now.
Great. Thanks, Gina.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I've worked with many of you as you've submitted your stories. First, a big thank you to everyone who has or will submit a story. We love these stories because they showcase the amazing work that SnapEd is doing all over the country. As you know, these stories don't replace any annual reports or papers that you need to write, so we really appreciate you putting in extra time and effort to share your successes. We started publishing success stories on the SnapEd Connection website in 2012 as we were hearing from SnapEd folks that they wanted to be able to have a venue to share their successes. And we continue to hear that SnapEd programs want to showcase their success and share it. We're happy to be able to provide a platform for that. In fact, during our recent call for stories, we received over 60 stories in 1 month, showing us that people really do want to communicate their successes with a wider audience. So this webinar is to help you share your success in a way that it can make the biggest impact. Success stories are important because they can easily tell the story of kids and families eating better, moms making their food budget stretch, and the community having a better environment. They tell you something that you can use, they give you something that you can use to tell other people about your success in a way that they can understand what you do and why it works. These stories are different than annual reports, academic papers, or brochures, and sometimes that makes them difficult to write. To write effectively, I'd like you to think about your audience. Who will read this? We feature success stories about twice a month in our e-bulletin. It goes out to over 27,000 people, and we know they're not all in SnapEd. The people reading your stories on our site will be reading them online, and people who read online read differently than in print. The people reading your stories may not have any background in SnapEd at all. This webinar will hopefully give you some ideas on how to most effectively tell your story, whether it be to a potential funding partner or to your father-in-law. We'll be starting with some insight from Stephanie Cousins on how to use the technique of storytelling in communications. Then we'll move on to Beth Peralta, who will talk about the process they use to submit their excellent success story to the SnapEd Connection. And we'll also hear from Pamela Bruno, who will tell us about how they went about organizing many different agencies to write over 10 different stories. And finally, I'll wrap up at the end with the 5 most common mistakes that we see here at SnapEd Connection in stories that have been submitted to us, as well as how to avoid them. And with that, I will turn it over to Stephanie, or to Gina.
Real quick, I'm just going to switch the slide deck over to Stephanie's slides. And thank you, Jennifer. Our speaker is going to be Stephanie Cousins. She's with Brighter Bites. Stephanie is the Director of Marketing and Communications at Brighter Bites. She's responsible for the organization's corporate communications, strategic marketing, and branding. Stephanie has more than 2 decades of experience in broadcast and communications field and holds an MPH from the Gillings School of Global Public Health at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So you should be able to see her slides now, and I'm going to move the presenter status over to Stephanie. So Stephanie, you should be able to advance the slides now.
Super. Thanks, Gina. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to say that I have written a success story for Brighter Bites in the past, but as Gina said, today I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to tell a different kind of story. I'm going to tell the story of Brighter Bites, and I'll demonstrate how we utilize a variety of storytelling tools for communications and marketing purposes, and as an agent for change in public health and health promotion. I will discuss how the branding of Brighter Bites has strengthened the organization, galvanized for-profit companies to collaborate, and created excitement among thousands of families around a movement towards improved health. For those of you that don't know, Brighter Bites is a nonprofit with a mission to create communities of health through fresh food. Brighter Bites is an evidence-based, comprehensive, multi-component elementary school, preschool, and summer camp program that utilizes reliable access to fruits and vegetables, nutrition education, and consistent exposure to recipes and messages that feature fresh fruits and vegetables, which we deliver directly into families' hands and teach them how to use. Our goal is to change behavior among children and their families to prevent obesity and achieve long-term health. We've been conducting active programming for 5 years and have had our nonprofit status for just 2. We began receiving SNAP-Ed funding in Texas only in 2016. So stories enable people to connect, especially those that are personal. And whenever our staff talks about Brighter Bites, we always tell the organization's founding story. For several years, Lisa Helfman and her family took part in a weekly fruit and vegetable co-op, and she watched her children's eating habits dramatically transform. So much so that her little boy turned down a piece of cake at a birthday party, asking for fruit instead. Stunned by the changes in her own home, Lisa wanted to bring a co-op to underserved communities in Houston. Just like it happened in her house, she wanted those families to be exposed to more fruits and veggies at home and receive recipes to use them. She knew there was a need for what she wanted to do, but she had to find people in Houston that could help her turn her idea into a reality. She partnered with KIPP, a national charter school network, the Houston Food Bank, and Dr. Srila Sharma, who's a professor of epidemiology and nutrition expert at the University of Texas Health School of UT Health School of Public Health in Houston. Dr. Sharma was able to provide the much-needed nutrition expertise Lisa needed to create learning opportunities for the families. Plus, she loved Lisa's idea and wanted to help her. Oops. So, that was right. So a total of 3 well-known brands had come together for a purpose: to improve the lives of children and their families who didn't have access to produce and teach them how to use it. And Brighter Bites, the brand, was born. A decade ago, the dominant brand paradigm in the nonprofit sector focused on communications. Branding was a tool for managing the external perceptions of an organization, a subject for the communications, fundraising, and marketing departments. Brand now has a broader and more strategic role in an organization's core performance, as well as having an internal role in expressing an organization's purpose, methods, and values. And as the slide says, a strong brand is increasingly seen as critical in helping to build operational capacity, galvanize support, and maintain focus on the social mission. The foundation of the marketing and communications efforts at Brighter Bites is the brand, and with it, we have created a value proposition to the families we are serving. The logo promises healthy, fresh food, tools to learn how to use it, and a brighter future. The brand is optimistic and bright and creates a feeling of excitement around the mission of the organization and the promise of what it means. In this slide, you see our branded bag, our t-shirt, a red square information booklet, the cover of my presentation today, and an image of our founders, Lisa Helfman and Dr. Sharma, wearing the t-shirts and holding the bag at a produce bagging where the brand is ubiquitous. We also have Brighter Bites Nalgene water bottles that we give to teachers to encourage hydration and to set an example for their students. The staff at Brighter Bites has branded name tags, branded t-shirts, and fleeces. As staff members, we are a living embodiment of the brand, and we are experts in the produce nutrition information and recipes we provide. Here we have photos of our volunteers wearing our t-shirts during produce baggings, our staff during distribution, and the children of our volunteers who get so excited about both events. They get tattoos on their arms, wear their t-shirts, and proudly hold fresh veggies, which brings us full circle. We are building excitement and trust around a health promotion program for kids, and they understand what Brighter Bites is and come to expect that they'll get something fun and delicious from these events and at home where they want their parents to prepare it for them, and eventually buy it at the store when the Brighter Bites season has concluded. We use the photos we take at our sites and in our kitchen for telling stories about our success on social media, our website, and our newsletter. We are active on all the major social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and use storytelling as a vehicle to educate and promote. We also have a video featured on our website that tells our story in a really fabulous visual way. The Brighter Bites brand becomes very important when talking to our myriad stakeholders, shown on the left of this chart, which we do through multiple channels, which are shown at the top of the chart. But we always use the same voice. And because we speak with the same voice, we need to have consistency in the brand. Some might find this encumbering, but it's actually rather freeing because we don't have to be a different organization to each audience. This consistency gives us the freedom to develop new creative communications tools at any time we want. Over the past couple of years, we have indeed developed a variety of partners across all different sectors, including public and private, nonprofit and for-profit, retail, wholesale, agriculture, and academic. These collaborations allow us to tell even more stories utilizing other brands and expanding our reach as well. And we've been recognized for what we do, because Brighter Bites is working. One Austin mom told us that Brighter Bites made her cook things she wouldn't have bought for fear of wasting money if her children didn't like it. We often call our program a risk-free trial for families because before they purchase the produce on their own. We use these quotes in our materials to show success and encourage collaboration. The research we've completed on the Brighter Bites implementation and impact have been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. To communicate our impact on families' behavior change, we've used the brand and iconic language that goes with it in a way that may be understood at the consumer level. For example, these graphics show in a simple to understand way that the children and parents who did receive Brighter Bites demonstrated healthier snacking, consumed more fruits and vegetables, and decreased the amount of added sugars than children and parents who did not receive Brighter Bites. These graphic representations of our findings appear in our red marketing booklets and on our website to explain the science on a consumer level. And finally, this slide illustrates how much Brighter Bites has grown. We started in 2012 serving 150 kids in one Houston school. Since then, together with our partners, Brighter Bites has provided more than 16 million pounds of produce and hundreds of thousands of nutrition education materials to more than 40,000 families at over 100 sites across Houston, Dallas, Austin, New York, Washington, D.C., and Southwest Florida. And here's my information if anyone wants to get in touch with me. And thank you, I'm all done.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Love those pictures. We are going to switch gears a little bit now and head over to Illinois, where we'll hear from our next speaker, Beth Peralta. She is a registered and licensed dietitian with over 10 years of experience. She is currently working with the University of Illinois Extension as the SNAP-Ed implementing agency as a media communications specialist for SNAP-Ed and FNEP programming. I've got your slide deck up now, and Beth, I'm handing you the presenter status, so you should be able to advance. You should be able to advance the slides now.
Okay, I don't see my slides. I still see the end of Stephanie's slides on my screen.
Okay. Hang on just a second.
Okay, that's fine.
Let me.
Okay, there we go.
Do you see them now?
I do.
Great. Now you should be getting presenter status, so you should be able to advance the slides.
I do. So I want to thank you for having me on this call today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience in our first SNAP-Ed Connection success story that we submitted, which was for our Illinois Junior Chefs program. And my contact information is on the very front slide in case anyone wants to reach out to me afterwards. So the way that we went about the process of submitting our success stories, we first went through identifying our success story, then gathering the information, and then pulled it all together to show our overall impact. So the first step is identifying your success story. And so for us, we knew that Illinois Junior Chefs was special. So we were looking for something that was unique, and we knew that it was special because it was something that we started here. It started under this name in summer 2016. We did have an early version of it without the Illinois Junior Chefs name in 2015 as we began to explore writing our own summer cooking school curriculum. We knew that it was going well. Participation was very good across the state, and we know that participation in cooking is associated with better dietary intake for our youth. And we knew that we were seeing good outcomes in regards to variety of items with cooking, fruit and vegetable preferences, and self-advocacy. So we thought that that would be something that would be valuable to share with the larger audience of SNAP-Ed Connection. So we knew that it was very popular. There was in over 175 sites in fiscal year 17, and this is all across the state of Illinois. And if you're familiar with Illinois, you know it's a very diverse state. We've got extension and SNAP-Ed programming in not only our smaller communities, but also our more urban communities. And we had done lots of research to build evidence base, and we knew we were onto a success due to its popularity, not only among staff and youth, but also, you know, from what we were seeing in the research as well. So the next step was to gather the information. And this can be helpful to think in advance before you get started on programming, just to know what kind of information to start collecting. If you're in a position like me, I am located in our administrative offices on campus in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. So I am not necessarily out in the field where the classes are taking place. So gathering information did take a little bit more legwork. So the first step was that we had to get the facts, and we had to know you know, the who, what, where, when, why, and also how of our programming. So who was doing the work? We knew that our SNAP-Ed peer education staff were doing the work. We also were working with our 4-H counterparts. They were providing some team teachers in some of the counties. We had to look at what was the program, where was it taking place, when was it taking place, why was it created and why were we continuing it, and how does it take place, and how are we doing evaluations as well. And then taking a look at what were the evaluations saying. We did have formal research that was being done on our Illinois Junior Chefs curriculum as it was going through the different summers. We did have IRB approval, and we had a research coordinator who was working with us. And we were finding that there was significant improvements in cooking attitudes, self-efficacy, towards cooking, preferences for youth for fruits and vegetables, improvements in healthy eating and cooking behaviors. And we also noticed that 88% of children were improving their cooking skills after they completed the program. And it's a 10-hour program that takes place over 5 days. So it's a 2-hour-a-day cooking school. Next, I know that there's going to be some more about photos today, but I wanted to share about how photos tell so much more than text. I know that we all know that because, especially with the rise in social media, you know, everything is very visual, but I think it's really important to keep talking about it because it's very easy to forget to take that photo when the program is taking place. So since I'm located here on campus, I was able to go out and do some site visits to take photos, but I also worked with a lot of others in our extension field that were able to help take pictures when I was not able to go visit a particular program. So our local peer educator staff, their supervisors, local marketing staff, and others that might be on site for different programming. So over the course of the 2 or 3 years, we've developed quite a database of photos. We have a lot of food photos too, because as you know, when you're taking photos, particularly of youth, you have to be really careful with photo releases. And in some sites, you know, we were unable to collect photo releases from all of the participants' families. And then quotes, and this goes along with what Stephanie was talking about with storytelling. Quotes are really powerful. Numbers and photos are great, but a quote from a family can really mean a lot. And for, you know, some of the people that might be reading the story, this can be really what captures their attention. So knowing, you know, who you could potentially get quotes from, whether it would be participants, parents, and guardians. We've gotten quotes from our partner agencies that we work with to do the programming, other stakeholders. We do have our staff send in quarterly success stories with their SNAP education work. So many of the success stories we receive in the summer months are related to Illinois Junior Chefs. And this was one of my personal favorites because it was a child who talked about now they go shopping with their mom for groceries, and they actually plan and cook dinner for the family each week, one night, from a recipe that they learned in the class. And I also love that they talked about how they remind them about using food safety with knives in the kitchen and washing their fruits and vegetables. And it really amplifies the message that you're trying to reach your stakeholders, and it really has adds that personal feel to your story. Okay, so then once you have all the details, it's really a matter of putting it all together in a way that helps show the impact that you had. And one of the things that I shared with Jennifer yesterday is I had started working on the success story after emailing her, and she had shared a tip sheet with me on, you know, the types of information to make sure that we're using. And that's really the biggest, I guess, tip that I could have for putting all the pieces together, because you know, following along with the other formats that other states and other implementing agencies have used has been really key. I was reviewing a lot of the stories that were on the website already, seeing what kinds of content they were including, and thinking to myself, hey, I know we have stuff like this too that we can share. Using the images, so we made sure we shared, I believe, 3 photos in our story as well, to really help pull in that viewer and that person that might be looking at the story on the website. And then just trying to be really engaging in your writing and capturing the interest of the person that's reading it. One thing that, you know, can be challenging, especially when we're used to writing all of our reports and other brochures and materials, is that it can be really hard to write in a non-academic manner. So reminding ourselves to take off that, I guess, jargon hat can be really important to bring in that interest level of your person that might be reading the story. And I believe that's all I have today. I just want to say thank you for having me again. And again, if you want to reach out to me for any questions afterwards, my contact information is on my first slide.
Okay, thank you so much. And we did have already a great question that I'll just address now. Someone was asking if we could get the contact information for the speakers. So yes, I will send that. When I send out the email with the certificate of completion, we'll get the contact information for all the presenters as well, so that you all can have that and don't have to feverishly try to write it down while you're looking at the computer screen right now. So let me advance to the next slide deck here and do that. Okay. All right, so thank you, Beth. Everyone, next we're going to move over to New England now, and we're going to hear from Pamela Bruno. Pamela has been working in the field of public health for almost 20 years. Her experience includes program evaluation, strategic planning, and policy analysis, with a strong interest in rural and underserved populations. She's currently the lead evaluator for the main SNAP-Ed program at the University of New England, supporting the implementation team to track outcomes, demonstrate program success, and sustain program quality. So Pamela, you should have presenter status and should be able to advance through the slides now.
All right, great. Thanks so much. And thanks to the Snap Ed Connection for including Maine on this panel today. We're really happy to be here. So with my presentation, I'm going to cover some of the key points related to our experience. And I'm going to build a little bit on what Beth just talked about and give you some other ideas about different topic areas you might be able to cover in success stories. So I'll talk about the stories that kicked off our efforts and what we learned from that process. And then I will walk through how we've ended up with 4 types of success stories, stories that represent our work at each of the 3 levels of the Snap Ed evaluation framework, and a 4th type of story that really ties everything together around a specific obesity prevention topic. And finally, I'll share some lessons learned. So just a little bit about Maine Snap Ed's program and structure. UNE, the University of New England, is the implementing agency. We contract with the Office for Family Independence at the Maine Department of Health and Human Services to deliver Snap Ed across the entire state. Here at UNE, we primarily provide leadership and TA to our community partners. We lead social marketing and state-level interventions, and we have an internal evaluation team. We contract with local community-based organizations to support the 41 educators that work to deliver our direct ed and PSE strategies across all 16 counties of Maine. So, how we got started with success stories. In our plan several years ago, we had proposed some very focused evaluations of 2 pilot projects designed to learn more about direct education efforts with very specific underserved populations, new Mainers with language and cultural barriers, and Snap Ed participants that were part of a community care team supporting high-risk patients. When the evaluations were completed and the reports were submitted, we knew we needed to share our lessons learned in a way that best supported scaling up those pilots, so we needed to summarize our evaluation findings for other educators implementing similar interventions across the state. And of course, we also wanted to celebrate the effort that went into these strategies. So we started by looking at the CDC's success story format, essentially thinking about repackaging our formal pilot project evaluation reports into the US CDC categories that you see here. This was a great structure for us, but at the time the templates that were available online were not actually 508 compliant, and we were really interested in being able to share our stories electronically. So we decided to work with a local graphic designer to adapt the CDC format to create a customized template for us here in Maine that would meet the compliance standards. So you can see here the very first success stories highlighting our pilot projects. We used direct education data from the tracking tools that we use that are already in place to collect EARS data, so that data was readily available. We added some partner survey data from our evaluations, including some quotes from the open-ended questions that we had in our surveys, and those really brought the stories to life as we've been talking about how effective quotes are. We worked with the lead nutrition educators for these projects to be sure we had included all of their community partners, and then we added in some statewide Snap Ed data in the sidebars to explain the broader context of our program. Luckily, we had some really great photos that our team here had taken during site visits, and these photos really highlighted the programs in action you can see here. So basically, we had everything we needed on hand. We just needed to repackage it. It was a really great way to describe our evaluation findings to ensure that what we learned was actually shared and scaled up. So we got a lot of great feedback on the pilot program success stories, and we decided that the format was a really effective way to share results. And at this point, we decided to be strategic about which findings we would highlight next. And so we went to the Snap Ed evaluation framework. I'm sure most of you participating on this webinar are really familiar with the USDA's framework, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you can see that I've highlighted the first level of the framework here, the individual level. And our pilot project evaluations had highlighted our work at this level, sharing our direct education successes. But our nutrition educators are also working at the environmental settings level, seen here in this slide, implementing policy systems and environmental or PSE changes all across the state. Our PSE evaluation efforts include tracking and reporting, similar to how we track direct ed, so we knew we could highlight successes at this level of the framework as well. Because these stories would need to come from our local nutrition educators, their community coalitions, and their implementing partners, the logistics for collecting information was a bit more challenging. We needed to develop a way to capture key elements of the story without requiring the individualized evaluations that we had done for the pilot projects, but not something we could do for every objective. So similar to the reporting system I mentioned for direct ed, we have a reporting system for collecting PSE data. We use an Excel-based tracking tool, and we decided that the easiest way to collect more information for our success stories would be to add a tab to that existing tool. We provided technical assistance to our educators on how to use the tab, how to document their PSE work with photos, and we asked them to save any promotional materials in the Dropbox that we use to share information. We made sure that our success story tab made it easy to keep track of partners, and we asked them for quotes whenever possible. So really quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time on our tool, but this is a screenshot of our general PSE tracking tool. It describes some detail about the annual objective. Our educators fill this out for all of their PSE work. And at the bottom part of the sheet is a monthly planning tool, and we use that for reporting at the end of the year. And this is the success story tab that we created. It collects all of the information we need to complete our modified CDC template. Educators are asked to fill this out when they feel like they have a really great story to tell, and then we can add in state-level data and follow up as needed with any local data that might be missing. So that process actually worked quite well. The tracking tool provided enough information to create draft narratives for successful PSE objectives, and the photos and other documentation were already in Dropbox. Our follow-up with the educators was really actually quite minimal. And using this process, we were able to highlight successes across all of our PSE strategy areas. So we work in community and school gardens, school and child care wellness, increasing access to fresh fruits and vegetables from local farms, and farmers markets. So you can see here we've got some images of, these are just 3 of them. We have quite a few at this point now. Then we went back to the framework. We decided to round out our success stories by sharing our sectors of influence work, that final level of the framework, and how we develop multi-sector partnerships. This level reflects our statewide efforts to implement SNAP-Ed in a way that has the broadest impact on Maine's SNAP-Ed population. So for these stories, we worked with some of our key partners to highlight collaborations and projects. We used a different approach to collect the information, taking the time to interview our partners, and then we added in some partner-specific definitions, explanations of their missions and their program reach. So we had to swap out some of our main SNAP-Ed data. And we found that partner-focused success stories are really useful in that they can help explain unique roles and prevent duplication issues, in addition to actually celebrating the work that we do together at the state level. So here are our sectors of influence examples. These are 2 partner stories that we've highlighted so far. Our collaboration with 5210 Let's Go and the successful Finney Farmers Market promotion campaign we worked on just this past summer. For both of these programs, some additional data collection certainly was required, like for quotes and to accurately describe the programs, but they were still pretty straightforward. All right, I'm going to end with the last chapter of our success story, the 4th and final type of story we've worked on. So at this point, we have quite a few success stories, and the format we had created really resonated with our stakeholders as well as with our state agency. The challenge of sugar-sweetened beverage consumption is a topic we address in all aspects of our programming, and it's a priority topic here in our state. Again, we approach the story content thinking about the framework. We address healthy beverages through all 3 levels of our programming, in our direct ed, with the wellness policy work our educators are doing at the environmental level, and at the social marketing and partnership level with the work we do here at the university. So we decided to write a success story that showed our efforts across all 3 levels of the framework. Using our existing evaluation data from our most recently submitted FNS report, we were able to write a story that highlights data from our curricula evaluations, the reach of our PSE efforts focused on healthy beverage strategies, and then we added in the analytics from our water promotion social marketing campaigns. So we covered all three areas. So that covers all 4 types of success stories that we've developed here in Maine. We have, I think, a total of 12 now, and we think it's a really great way to build expertise and create local connections across the state by sharing lessons learned. And ultimately, they really do help us advocate for our program and for the SNAP-Ed model. So here are some essential lessons learned, I would say, from the last couple of years. Always include data. You probably already have what you need from annual reporting and ongoing evaluations. Develop a format that you can drop in. I know I said we worked with a designer, but there are plenty of templates out there now that you can modify. Link to the evaluation framework if you can. Include key takeaways in your summary. Not everyone will read your whole story, so we work really hard to include the major things we want to highlight right up front. Include quotes and photos. I know we've covered this already, but it is so important. We found that before and after photos are really great. Get a photo of the school grounds before and after the garden is in place, and maybe even a few shots of the beds being planted. This is why it's so important that the educators are documenting their hard work on PSE change. And then work hard to list partners. This is sometimes challenging, but try not to leave anyone out. And that's it. Hopefully this has given you some practical ideas on different ways you can highlight your successes. All of our successes are available on our website, and the stories are also on the SNAP-Ed connection. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I love those success stories. Okay, finally, when you registered, we told you that we would share with you the 5 most common mistakes that we've seen when writing success stories and give you some strategies and practical tips on how to avoid them. So we are going to go back to Jennifer, and she's going to talk to us about these 5 mistakes and give you some great tips. So Jennifer, you should have the slide deck back. And I'm going to give you presenter status.
Great. Can you see the 5 most common mistakes?
Yes.
All right, great. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to wrap us up with the 5 most common success story mistakes that we see here at SNAP-Ed Connection and how to avoid them. And a lot of what I'm going to say now is related to what other presenters have talked about. So I'm just going to kind of provide a nice summary for you all. So the first mistake that we often see is no success. This whole webinar has been about how to share successes. Sometimes, unfortunately, we at SNAP-Ed Connection have a hard time finding the success in success stories that have been submitted. I may read a story and not be able to figure out what the program did, or in the case of a story talking about an emerging program, I may not be able to see the connection between what they are currently doing and what this means for a future successful program. To be a success story, not just a story, I need to know what happened as a result of the program with evaluation data and outcomes. Or if that data is still being collected, I need to see the metrics and the qualitative data, and I need the writer to very clearly explain to me why this is a success so far. It's all about the outcomes. Every success story must include outcomes. Here are the type of things that you need to include. First, the data from your evaluation. This includes quantitative data like statistics and metrics, and qualitative data such as pictures and quotes. Both are very important, although we really need at least some quantitative data to publish a story. Next, include how your program was evaluated or is currently being evaluated. Include the SNAP-Ed evaluation framework indicators if you're using those. Keep in mind, we do publish emerging success stories where the data is still being collected. For those, use what data you do have. Finally, include some metrics like the number of participants or some other descriptive metrics that apply to your program. And then, after you draft a success story, send it to a relative who doesn't know what you do. See if they think it's a successful program. If you can't do that, try to imagine an 80-year-old relative reading your story. Does it sound successful? If not, you may need to add more outcome information or simplify something. The solution to this mistake is to always include success. For the next mistake, I'll start with a question. Where is the most common place that people put the success part of their story? The answer is in the last paragraph. People usually use the first sentence to describe the name of the program and all of the lengthy names of the institutions and organizations that run that program. Then there's a list of the horrible problems of obesity in the community and maybe where funding came from and so on. But by this time, most readers are long gone. What we don't realize is most readers get scared off easily. Studies about reading behavior tell us that most web pages get 15 seconds or less of attention. 15 seconds, and most people read only about 20% of the words on a web page. Studies also tell us that most people who read a success story will spend about 45 seconds or less reading it if they decide to stick around at all. So it's up to you to grab people's attention quickly. It's highly unlikely that most people will read your whole story unless the first sentence grabs their attention, the story is well written, and it keeps their attention throughout. The question to ask yourself is, if someone gives me 15 seconds of their time, what do I want to say about my program? This makes your story title or your first sentence really important. If you give them something inspiring in the first sentence, they may keep reading and give you a full 45 seconds or more. Here are two examples of stories that we have received that are great ways to draw people in. First, we have the first two sentences from this success story. Children usually look forward to classroom parties filled with sweet treats and sugary beverages. But this year, thanks to Nutrition in Action, the Dickinson Elementary holiday party was filled with fresh fruits and yogurt at the students' request. Reading that is both inspiring and also sparks curiosity. How did they get the students to request fresh fruit and yogurt? I want to keep reading. In the second example, we see an organization who has used the title to explain exactly what they do. It's active and focuses on what the program is doing, creating wellness in preschools. Let's move on to the next section. Unreadable. Writing for online readers is tricky. In fact, most of us have been trained to write at the college level or beyond. We analyze the stories that have been submitted, and the reading levels come back 18th, 20th, even 24th grade reading level. It confirms that normal people reading these stories online are going to get scared off. Here's an example of an opening paragraph of a story that was submitted to us. I'll give you a few seconds to read this. Many of us are used to writing for a high-level or academic audience where a certain level of sophistication is expected. We've spent years perfecting this important skill. But what we need with success stories online is to hook people who have a short attention span. So how do we fix this? Well, we aim for an 8th grade reading level or below. This is the level people want to read online. This is true for people with normal and very high literacy abilities. Research shows most people want to read at 8th grade level or below. It's what allows them to keep reading past the first sentence. We know people are likely to leave a page if they aren't having a good reading experience, so we want to make it easy for them. A lower reading level means that we're using shorter words and sentences, where we remove unnecessary words. We use an active voice, bullets, more white space, and we use common everyday words. Essentially, we're using plain language. Do we always get to the 8th grade level or below? No, not really. Sometimes adding in evaluation information or just describing the program itself requires more specific vocabulary and a higher reading level. Words like nutrition or vegetables or physical activity all increase reading levels, not to mention policy systems and environmental change. We often publish stories at the 10th or 11th grade level because that's about as good as we can get, or that's how much time we have to do the editing. We will never leave out the success or evaluation sections of a story just because it raises the reading level. But we always shoot for what people want to read, the 8th grade level or below. The next mistake is too much jargon. This is related to reading level. To make sure that people can actually understand what we're saying, we have to think about our audience. They probably don't know what policy systems and environmental change means. Maybe they don't know what multi-sector or program delivery mean. So we need to tell them in order to make sure they hear what we're saying. Here are a few examples from plainlanguage.gov, which is a great resource on learning to write more clearly. First, the writer starts out with, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommends a half hour or more of moderate physical activity on most days, preferably every day. The activity can include brisk walking, calisthenics, home care, gardening, moderate sports exercise, and dancing. After some readability and plain language improvements, it was changed to, do at least 30 minutes of exercise, like brisk walking, most days of the week. While the second sentence is not as specific, it is more powerful because it's extremely clear. Another example, flood conditions contribute to the growth and transmission of many kinds of fungi, some of which can cause sickness. Cleanup workers are often at increased risk of exposure to airborne fungi and their spores because they often handle moldy building materials, decaying vegetable matter, rotting waste material, and other fungus-contaminated debris. The fungal material is carried into the respiratory tract when airborne particles are inhaled. This was changed to, be careful when cleaning up after a flood. You may be exposed to and breathe in unhealthy mold in the air, damp building materials, decaying vegetable matter, rotting waste material, any other damp debris. You can see the second one is much more clear. And finally, I'll finish up with one last example. We received this as part of a submission for a success story. You can see it's a pretty good sentence, as it is. Youth started a raised bed garden from scratch and learned how to use and care for garden tools. Produce grown included squash, tomatoes, green peppers, basil, dill, mint, eggplant, beans, Swiss chard, kale, and collard greens. All edible produce was donated to food pantry, fitting into program mission of giving and receiving. Take just a few seconds right now and think about what we could do to make this sentence even better. Here's what we did to improve the sentence. We shortened the sentences, added bullet points, and added white space. This allows the readers to skim and still get the idea of what they are reading. And we hit our goal of 8th grade reading level. So the solution to this problem is to avoid jargon. But there are a few cases in which we allow jargon, especially when the jargon is part of the program or is an important buzzword. Examples include the evaluation framework indicators, the term policy systems and environmental change, or PSE, or describing statistical outcomes. Those are all important and essential, so we do what we can to make them understandable. When we do use jargon, it's often appropriate to define what the term is or to give the information both with and without jargon. And finally, as many of the speakers have said, a picture says 1,000 words, and when you only have seconds to grab attention, a picture is your ticket to piquing people's interest. A picture can be 3 things for these success stories: something to add interest, a description of your program, or qualitative data showing an outcome. And it goes without saying, make sure you have photo releases for all people, and let us know we have permission to post your photos when you submit them to us. So first, photos can be something just to add interest, a stock photo. This is okay and much better than nothing. We have a photo gallery full of photos that may be appropriate for your story. Second, and even better, a picture or image can be a description of your program. This may be your logic model or an infographic, or you've taken pictures of what's going on, a garden, a table with fruits and veggies, or some participants standing together. These are all great, and we hope to have these pictures for every single story. Finally, and most powerfully, a picture can actually be qualitative data about your program. These pictures are powerful because they reinforce the quantitative statistics and metrics that you provide in your story. This is where there is a picture of the outcome. So the child eating veggies, the teen cooking, the person with a receipt showing how much money she saved, the children being active at school. These pictures should come toward the top of the story because even if a person only looks at one picture for a few seconds and reads nothing, they still just learned about the success of your program. So we need to have these pictures as much as possible. And quotes are also a powerful way to share your success. They're best when they demonstrate how people have changed or when they say something that supports the conclusions of your quantitative data. If your evaluation said your program helped people drink more water, include a participant quote about how the person decided to drink more water. I'll just read one of these here. Since you program staff started coming, Troy says, my blood pressure and diet have been better. I'm eating healthier and drinking more water. So these types of quotes are really powerful for people. And the solution to this problem is to always include pictures and quotes. So this concludes the informational portion of the webinar, and we'll now open it up for questions. So feel free to send a question through the chat box, and make sure you choose all panelists in your response. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, Stephanie, Beth, and Pamela. We've got a lot of great information today. I do have some questions that have come in, so we'll get to those, and we have a little over 5 minutes to go through as many questions as we can, so we'll jump right in. Like Jennifer said, if you have questions, you can still submit them via the chat box. Please select all panelists as the recipient. Most of the questions we got up at the top were kind of housekeeping related, so I'm just going to go through those and hopefully knock them all out. Yes, we are recording this and do plan to post it onto the SnapEd Connection website afterwards, so it can be viewed on demand at a later date. That process is a bit time consuming though, so I can't tell you exactly when it will be online, but we will be working on it and have it posted under the webinars section of our site as soon as we're able to. Someone asked me if we would send out a link to the recording when we send out the certificate. So I won't have it available like in the next couple of days, so I won't send a link to it with the certificate, but we will work on getting that onto the site. And on that note, if you are watching this as a recorded event in the future and would like a certificate of completion so you can get credit, just email us at the SnapEd Connection inbox and request the, let us know that you viewed the webinar and would like a certificate. We also had a few requests for the contact information for the speakers. I mentioned I'm going to be sending that out when I send out the email with the certificates of completion. We'll also work on compiling one PDF that is the slide deck for all the speakers. If I try to send all the PowerPoint presentations, it's going to be too big of a thing, too big of a file, and it'll bounce back from a lot of you. So we'll send a PDF version of the speaker slides so everyone can have a copy of those. And then I believe that was all of the housekeeping questions. So the first question that we had that was for one of the speakers was for Pamela. And the question was, Pamela, how do you share these success stories and through what venues? So Pamela, would you mind responding to that?
Sure, of course. So we share the success stories that are relevant to our nutrition educators during trainings in weekly digests and on our website. And we work through those. We kind of ask them to kind of take a look at them, connect with other educators, and then, of course, they're interested in all of our success stories, and those are available on our website. We share them pretty broadly locally. We share them with our local community partners, and they share them further at the local level. We distribute them through our leadership council, which is essentially our snack to all of our key partners. And we've also shared them with our state and federal legislators. I think that covers most of it.
Okay. Another question for you that came in was, these are wonderful examples of success stories. You shared that you had a designer work with you on the format, but if possible, could you share any links to examples of drop-in formats for success stories?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. How do you guys suggest that I might do that?
Why don't you say, if you have any like actual links, you could just send them to me, and I'll put that out with the email, the follow-up email to participants.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, next question is, kind of a general question. There was a question on what is 508 compliance. Jennifer, do you want to do a quick 2 or 3 sentences about that? And maybe if any of the other presenters have any tips or could provide some information on where folks interested in this topic could learn more, or kind of what your process has been for dealing with 508 compliance?
Yeah, so 508 compliance, basically, just in a very small nutshell, make sure that everybody looking at a document, whether they have visual impairments or not, can access that document in its fullest form. So it's making sure that the images have alternate text and things and can work with a screen reader and that sort of thing. So anything that goes onto our website is 508 compliant. And of course, we encourage all documents everywhere to be 508 compliant so that everybody has access to those documents.
Any of the presenters have any comments on 508 compliance, or how you've managed to navigate?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, this is Pamela. I mean, we did, it was a challenge for us, and our designer was super helpful with it, because there are issues relating to reading order and things like that sort of behind the scene, and she really helped us create a template that was easy to work with.
Thank you. And I know there are a lot of resources online that maybe I could find some links to put out in the email as well. If you're just getting started in that process, just to give you a little bit of a background. I mean, there are people who just specialize in that subject that you can work with as consultants, but there's also a lot of work that you can do in-house to make things 508 compliant. Okay. We just got a bunch of questions just now, so I'm going to try to go through them and make sure that we don't miss any. There's a question here that says, is it ever acceptable to list bulleted items in 2 or 3 columns? Jennifer, since you talked about kind of bulleted lists and white space, do you want to address that one?
Sure. Yeah, there may be times when that's appropriate. We usually try to avoid that online, just because people may be reading on a smaller device and several columns kind of gets in the way. At the same time, we definitely do that. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis. If you can fit it all into 1 column, great. If not, it might be an option to do 2 or 3 columns. But generally, that's more difficult to read for people.
Okay, and another question, which was a follow-up to that one, is could you please share more specifics about using one voice, which I think is a term that Stephanie used when you were talking about Brighter Bites. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Jennifer, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we've really made it, we've really made a decision that we can speak in one voice about our program to anyone, and it's always very positive. It's very, it's always talks about our pillars. We're always, which are produce distribution, nutrition education, and the fun food experience. Our voice, it's positive. It's focused on what we do. It's also very, it's very bright. We often use puns. I'd say that, you know, maybe we tone it down a little bit on something like LinkedIn, but even then we're very positive. We like to, we're cheerleaders. We like to cheer on our partners. We like to cheer on our families. And so that's what I meant with one voice. And the voice that we use is pretty consistent across social media, across the Brighter Bite, which is our newsletter. On the website, you'll notice that it's all pretty much the same voice. We're gracious, we're cheerleaders, we're thankful, we're excited, we're thrilled, we're honored. And so that's what I meant by one voice.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
A couple questions here. One was, how do we get to the SnapEd Connection inbox to request an attendance certificate for professional development? First, I'll reiterate that if you are on the call today on a live event right now on May 8th, you don't need to email us. I'm just going to send that to you. whether you want it or not. If you don't want it, delete it. But you will be getting that automatically. But if you do need to contact us to follow up with anything, or if you're viewing this as a recorded event later, you can email us. Our email address is snap-edconnection@fns.usda.gov, and you can find that on our homepage under About. There's a Contact Us tab, and you can find our email address right there. So, but again, if you're on the call live today on May 8th, 2018, you do not need to email us for that certificate. You'll just get it. And there were a couple questions here about how often is there a formal ask from USDA to submit success stories to SNAP-Ed Connection, annually, quarterly? Jennifer, do you want to respond to that? Or
sure.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, well, we've done it once, but we are always asking for them informally, and you can submit them at any time. You don't have to submit it as part of an official call for resources. We're happy to receive them at any time.
Okay, thank you. We are out of time, but there are a couple more questions that I'll just address very briefly that are related to, is there a ADA or 508 compliant template that USDA provides or can provide for success stories? To the best of my knowledge, that is not something that already exists or is in the works to be created, like one standard template for everyone to use. So far, the success stories have been, oh, I need to mention the tip sheet. Somebody asked about that too. Basically, we've provided a tip sheet for agencies to follow, but we don't have a template that I know of. So I'm sorry. No, we don't have something like that right now. Another question that did come in earlier was one of the speakers, I think it was Beth, mentioned the tip sheet. And we had several questions saying, what's this tip sheet and how do I get it? That is something that is actually available. I'll add that to the email that I send out, but it is also on our site and has been on our site. So anyone can access that right now if you're interested. If you go to our Success Stories page on our website, you can find it it's under the SNAP-Ed Works tab. There's a link for Success Stories. At the very top, there is a button to submit your stories, which links to our email, and then a sentence that says, please write your stories using this tip sheet. There's a hyperlink to the tip sheet right there. It's just a Word document with some of the basic recommendations for writing effective stories. So that's not a new item, but it might be new to you. So check it out. That's available. You can download it today if you'd like. That is, if there are any other questions that have come in recently, I'm sorry I'm not going to have time to get to them today, but if I can answer them privately via email, I will. That's all the time we've got today. So thank you to everyone who was interested in attending today to our webinar, and a special thanks to our speakers who shared your time and expertise with us all today. If you like reading SNAP-Ed success stories and keeping up with what other SNAP-Ed programs across the country are doing, and you're not already receiving our e-bulletin, be sure to sign up for that today. You can do that by clicking the big orange button on our homepage that says sign up now. In addition to important program news and updates, we do highlight success stories from across the country every couple of weeks, and we would love to be sharing those with you. So have a nice rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much for attending.